Hello everyone and welcome back to TV7 Live and Champions Network. Today we are looking at a major political development in Zimbabwe that is already creating a lot of discussion across the country and beyond. President Emmerson Mnangagwa has signed a new constitutional law that changes several important parts of Zimbabwe's political system. The new law extends the length of term for the presidents, members of parliament and local government leaders. It also introduces major changes to the country's electoral system. What has made this development especially controversial is that it comes 8 years after Mnangagwa publicly stated that he believed constitutional term limits should be respected and that 10 years in office was enough for any president to carry out their vision. Now, let's break down what has happened and why it matters. Back in September 2018, shortly after winning Zimbabwe presidential election, President Emmerson Mnangagwa was interviewed by CNN journalist Christian Amanpour. During that interview, he spoke about the importance of constitutionalism and respecting the set of rules set out in the constitution. He said that even if people loved him and wanted him to stay, he would still leave office once he reached the constitutional limit. According to him, leaders should give others a chance to lead. Mnangagwa also said that 10 years was long enough period for a president to implement their plans and vision for the country. At the time, many people viewed those comments as commitment to democratic principles and constitutional governance. Fast forward to 2026 and Zimbabwe now adopted the Constitution of Zimbabwe Amendment Number 3 Act. Legislation has completed the parliamentary process after receiving the required 2/3 majority support in parliament. It was then signed into law by President Emmerson Mnangagwa and officially published in the Government Gazette. According to the government, the purpose of the amendments is to create stability and continuity in governance. Supporters of the law argue that longer terms will allow leaders to complete development projects and implement long-term policies without frequent election cycles interrupting their work. However, critics have raised concerns about the impact of these changes could have on democratic accountability and citizen participation. One of the biggest changes introduced by the new law is the extension of the term in office. Previously, the president, member of parliament and local authority officials served 5-year terms. Under the new law, these terms will now last 7 years. This means the election will happen less frequently and elected leaders will remain in office for longer periods before facing voters again. Another significant change involves how the president will be elected. Under the previous system, Zimbabwe's citizens directly voted for their president through national elections. The new law changes this arrangement by providing for the president to be elected by parliament rather than through a direct popular vote. For many observers, this is one of the most dramatic changes in the amendment because it alters the ways citizens participate in choosing the country's highest office leader. The law also expands the Senate. Before the amendment, the Senate had 90 members. The new legislation increases the number of senators to 90. The additional positions will be filled through presidential appointments, giving the president clear influence over the composition of the upper house of parliament. Another major reform affects voter registration. Previously, voter registration was managed by the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, known as ZEC. Under the new law, the responsibility will move to the Registrar General. Supporters say the change will improve administrative efficiency, while critics argue that voters' registration is a crucial electoral function that should remain under an independent electoral body. The amendments also establish a new delimitation commission. The commission will be responsible for drawing electoral boundaries and the determining of constituencies. Members of this commission will be appointed by the president because the electoral boundaries can influence election outcomes. This provision is likely to remain a subject of public debate. Changes have also been made to the judicial appointment process. The law removes the requirement for public interviews when appointing judges. Public interviews have been introduced as part of efforts to increase transparency and public confidence in judicial appointments. Supporters of the amendment believe alternative procedures can still ensure qualified candidates are selected, while critics worry removing public interviews may reduce transparency. The new legislation further revises presidential succession procedures. Although succession rules are often technical and legal in nature, they are important because they determine what happens if the president leaves office before the end of term. Changes of succession arrangements have a significant impact on political stability and the transfer of power. Taken together, these reforms represent some of the most substantial changes to the 2013 constitution since it was adopted. The amendment affects elections, governance structures, parliamentary representation, judicial appointments, and presidential terms. Because of their wide-reaching nature, many analysts expect continued legal, political, and constitutional debates in the months and years ahead. For supporters of the law, the reforms are about continuity and long-term planning. They argue that the government needs more time to complete major projects and implement policies without disruption of frequent elections. They believe longer terms can provide stability and allow leaders to focus on development goals. For critics, however, the amendment raises the questions about democratic accountability. They argue that regular elections give citizens opportunities to evaluate leaders and decide whether they should continue in office. Reducing the frequency of election and changing how presidents are chosen could, in their view, weaken public participation in governance. What has drawn the most attention, though, is the contrast between the new law and Mnangagwa's comments in 2018. At that time, he emphasized the constitutional limits were important and that 10 years was sufficient for a leader to implement a vision before handing over to someone else. Now, with the signing of the new constitutional amendment number 3, many people are comparing those earlier statements with the latest constitutional changes. As the debate continues, one thing is clear: the amendment marks a major turning point in Zimbabwe's political and constitutional history. Whether it ultimately delivers the stability and continuity promised by its supporters, or whether it raises new concerns about governance and democratic accountability, will remain a key topic of discussion for years to come. What do you think of these constitutional changes? Do you believe longer terms can help governance complete development projects, or do you think regular elections are essential for accountability? Show your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this video informative, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notifications so that you do not miss our updates. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.